Hey guys, Aaron Kubitz, personal trainer, functional aesthetics EC, helping average guys perform better inside and outside the gym. So as I say usually at the end of my videos, this channel is about helping guys to learn how to exercise to build muscle, to lose body fat, to also help you prevent getting injuries in the process of doing that, and if you do sustain those injuries, how to work around them. And that's what I want to be focusing on in this video, this last part about injury prevention, injury rehabilitation. So in my fitness journey, I've actually sustained a couple of shoulder injuries, primarily due to having high stress and being in a rush when I was doing the exercises. So just to kind of drive home that point that it is very beneficial to you to learn how to manage emotions, how to keep yourself calm in stressful situations, because invariably every time that I've gotten injured has always been during a time of either when I was overly fatigued when I was working out, or when I was under a lot of stress, under a lot of pressure, and therefore my mind was racing in 100 different directions and not focused on what I was doing in the gym. So, be that as it may, I've injured my shoulder, the right one, a couple of times. The first one, I separated the AC joint, so that's basically where you have the acromion here in the shoulder, ties into the clavicle here, or your collarbone. So acromial clavicular joint, AC joint, right where these the bone here joins into the shoulder. That little joint there got separated, and so I had to spend a little bit of time rehabbing that. Another time I was doing handstands on a set of parallettes, and the dog came and licked me in the face. I lost concentration, tipped off of those, and ended up straining my rotator cuff. I believe it was a supraspinatus that I ended up straining with that. And then another time I ended up injuring my labrum. So I have a torn labrum, and what I'm going to show you in this video is the things that I was able to do to come back even stronger than I was prior to having the injuries. Okay, so the first thing that a lot of guys think about when it comes to shoulder health is your rotator cuff, right? And so you'll be doing exercises, you know, either laying sideways on a bench with a dumbbell like this, or kneeling on the floor and doing your rotator cuff exercise with your dumbbell like this, right? To help exercise your rotator cuff. And while it can be beneficial, this is not the first place that you want to start if you're trying to keep your shoulders healthy in the long term. Reason being is that the rotator cuff the muscles in the rotator cuff are very small muscles. They primarily play a stabilizing role to keep the head of your upper arm bone centered, stabilized, and supported in the glenohumeral joint, or your shoulder socket, right? And so if the first place that we want to start is by making sure that all the bigger muscles, the postural muscles, and your spine as a whole is set up and in alignment to make sure that those rotator cuff muscles are, in fact, playing their stabilizing role and not playing a more supportive role due to the rest of the system being out of balance, therefore the rotator cuff having to exert more force than it is designed to do. Because the rotator cuff, being a stabilizing muscle, is a high, these muscles in there, your supraspinatus, infraspinatus, and teres minor, subscapularis, are all high endurance muscles because they're supposed to stabilize. They're not primary load bearing muscles. So the first place that you want to start before addressing anything for your rotator cuff, because we're going to do some of that stuff, but most people are aware of that, first place you want to start is actually by helping to increase thoracic mobility, or the upper portion, upper half of your spine. You want to gain mobility through there. So due to a lot of the jobs that people have, people are spending a lot of time sitting like this. Now, it's not bad to hunch over from time to time, right? What is bad is that when your default posture becomes hunched over like this, right? And so we want to make sure that you're not having your default posture become like this, right? So over time, when you spend the majority of your day like this, though, your default posture can become like that. And what happens is that not only do your muscles on the back side of your body become weak and overstretched, the muscles on the front side of the body also tend to become tight. They might also be weak as well, but they become shortened because they're chronically in this position, right? And the fascia that also covers those muscles, right, which is like shrink wrap surrounding your muscles. If you've ever taken a chicken breast or something, you're going to go fry it up, and you got that little membrane on the outside of the meat, that's like the fascia. And all of us have this fascia that surrounds all of our skin. If you ever go deer hunting or something and you're skinning out a deer and it has all this membrane holding the skin onto the muscles, right? That again is fascia. Now this fascia can get out of alignment as well, and so that's the first place that we want to start. We want to, similar to before you plant seeds in a garden, we want to be loosening up the soil, making it more accepting to what we're going to do afterwards, which is plant the seeds, the other exercises that we're going to be doing later on. So first and foremost, we want to be focusing on this thoracic mobility to help mobilize that, loosen up the spine, loosen up the fascia, realign the fascia, get it, because sometimes it can get stuck and adhered in wrong patterns, right? So we want to make sure that we are addressing that first and foremost before we go on into any more in-depth exercises. Okay, and so the way that we're going to go about doing that is the classic foam roll for your thoracic spine, foam rolling for your back. So, and we're going to add a little bit of a twist to the end of it, which in fact is an extremely effective way to also help you to unwind at the end of a long, stressful day, or if you're just mentally tired. At least in my opinion, it's very helpful for this. I'm not sure of the mechanisms why, but it tends to be very effective for that. So you want to position this foam roller at the bottom half of your thoracic spine, so about the middle of your back, right? You don't want to go all the way down to your lower back. You want to start out about the middle, just below the bottom of your shoulder blades, okay? And so from there, you're going to then take in a deep breath as you put your hands behind your head. Breathe in as you roll up towards the top of your back. Exhale as you come back down. And go at that nice speed. This also helps you, this is the main way that it helps you to relax, right? You're activating that parasympathetic nervous system through the breathing. If you've ever heard of, like with the Navy SEALs doing their box breathing, right? Which is like 4, 5 second hold. It's like 4 seconds inhale, 5 seconds hold, 4 seconds exhale, and repeat like that. When you're doing any sort of exercise in the gym as well, you want to be, when you're breathing, when you're doing the exercise, you want to allow the rep speed to be such that it allows you to complete your full breathing all the way up and down. Because if you're only doing half breaths because you're going so fast, you're going to run out of oxygen. Same thing here, when you're going up and down. I know I'm maybe belaboring this point, but it's a small but also critical detail when you're doing this. So again, breathing in. And if you have a lot of knots in there, especially after a long day, a lot of times for me, if I get stressed out, I'll start getting knots up in my trapezius up here, up in my neck. And doing this, I'll feel a bunch of just kind of cracking going up and down my spine. Helps to loosen up my neck, get those kinks out of there and everything, and help me feel a little bit more relaxed. So what you're going to do at the end of this, though, is after you've rolled up and down a few times, maybe 4 or 5 times up and down, then you're going to finish it off with and with this one here, when you're extended out over that foam roller, you want to be breathing all the way down deep into your belly and relaxing your throat muscles here, right? And you can, as you breathe in, focus on the stretch. Stretch out your abs, stretch out your chest a little bit if you can, and then stretching out your sternocleidomastoid, your SEM muscles here, right? Stretch out the front of your neck as you breathe in, and then you can relax a little bit, contract as you exhale, and then on the inhale, try to stretch back a little bit further. And that will really help to open you up, relax you, help to set the stage for the exercises that are to come after that. Okay guys, so the next thing that we want to do is to stretch out our lats. Two of the most popular back exercises in the gym are your lat pull downs and your pull-ups. And these are good back exercises, but they, if done improperly or if done in excess or out of balance with other pulling exercises, they can actually exacerbate or increase the problems that you have with your posture and the health of your shoulder joints. So when you're doing pull-ups, if you do them properly, you can engage your upper back, but the primary mover in a pull-up is your lats. So the muscles right down here along the side, right? Now the primary function of the lats is to bring your arms together, extend your arm to the shoulder joint, and also to internally rotate your shoulders as well. So if you are doing a bunch of pull-ups and you're doing them also like a lot of people do them, where you are kind of hunching like this when you're pulling yourself over the bar, you see how my back kind of rounds forward when I'm hunching, right? So now you're disengaging your upper back and you're really relying primarily on your arms, your forearms, and your lats. So what do you think is going to happen to the shoulder joint? You're going to round forward like this, and then if you add some bench presses and stuff to that, you're going to end up kind of like this. And then if you sit all day, you end up even more like this, right? So what does that do? Everything back here is weak, shoulder is pulled out of alignment, you're going to set yourself up for more risk of injury. And for those who are like, well, I'll take my chances, it's also going to decrease your strength potential. If you can't perform a full range of motion in your bench press because your shoulders are rounded forward, you're not going to be able to, the ability to build muscle in your chest is going to be limited, right? Because you're not able to get that stretch at the bottom, right? If you're only doing half range of motion, it's not going to provide much stimulus for growth. The stretch position is what generates most of the growth when you're doing an exercise. So if you want to be able to bench press more, build more muscle, in the long term, it's going to behoove you to fix up that posture. And so this is why we don't want to be doing a lot of the pull-ups and stuff like that with improper form. And when you're doing the pull-up, as I'm going to show you in another exercise, which is probably the following exercise after this one, will show you how you can help to avoid some of this by doing your pull-ups properly. And then also some exercises you can do to help to increase the strength of your upper back, specifically your lower trapezius. So, lat stretch. This is my favorite one. You basically grab up on a bar just above or parallel to shoulder height. You're going to then lean back like this in a lunge position. And then for a lot of people, this is going to be plenty of a stretch, just like this, okay? Now, if you want to make sure that you can really relax your arm, what you can do is you can loop a really heavy resistance band, maybe one of those ones you use for assisted pull-ups, wrap that around your wrist so you don't even have to grip anything. And you can just completely relax your arm and just lean back into it, okay? Now, when that starts to become easy, so you're leaning back like this, then what we want to do is we want to raise our rib cage up towards the ceiling. So, inhale, and then exhale as we're rotating under, and look through the window made by squat rack, arm, and your torso. And that will intensify the stretch. You feel it all the way down to your pelvis. Okay? And as with anything, what you do on one side, make sure you do it on the other side as well. So that right there is a really excellent way to help loosen that up, which oftentimes becomes very tight from just doing excessive amounts of pulls and things like that. The other thing is, provided you're not doing this before you do your pull-ups, doing heavy stretches for your lats after you get done with your main sets of pull-ups or your lat pull-downs can actually help to increase muscle size and strength in the long term doing really heavy loaded stretches. So not only is it going to help you to keep your shoulders a little bit healthier, stretching those lats out is also going to help to stretch the fascia surrounding the lat muscles, which will be like stuffing, basically allowing for more space for that muscle to grow inside of. It's like if you had a pillowcase and you're trying to stuff a pillow that's too big for it in there, it's not going to go so well. But if you expand that out, now you're going to be able to have more size and space there. So stretching after a lot of your movements can actually help you to grow more muscle as well. Alright guys, so at the beginning of this video, I mentioned that rotator cuff exercises are not the best place or the first place that you should start when you are trying to improve your shoulder health. The first place that you want to start is, as I said before, you want to loosen up the tight muscles, right? So lat muscles, and in another video I'm going to show you some other muscles that you also probably want to address as well. And you want to help to increase mobility in your thoracic spine, right? Because if you're like this all the time, you want to loosen that up a little bit, get the kinks out of it, break up that soil like in the garden, right? Because if you just throw seeds on hard packed soil, probably not going to have the greatest chance of growing, right? So the next thing we want to do after we've loosened everything up is now we want to do some exercises to strengthen up the muscles that are chronically weak. Well, what is usually the biggest culprit for having poor shoulder health, having poor posture? It's not your rhomboids doing like reverse flies and all this kind of stuff. That's a good one, and we'll get into that. But it's actually your lower trapezius, okay? So if you look at your back, from the back, you have this diamond-shaped muscle, right? You can see these muscles here a little bit up on the top. A lot of guys, they like to build big beefy traps up there. It makes them, feel like a stud, right? Having these massive, traps and everything like that. Also probably help you to carry that heavy barbell when you're doing super heavy back squats, right? Well, that's the upper traps, and this is usually the area that is overly developed, especially if you have a lot of stress too. You tend to hold a lot of tension up there, right? So we don't necessarily want to be training these a lot more, because if you're doing like Olympic lifts, if you're doing deadlifts, a lot of exercises that you do throughout the day that aren't even directly targeting your traps are going to be targeting, like directly meant for your traps, are going to be targeting your traps. So just like biceps and chest, which a lot of times get overtrained, upper traps too, it's not bad to train them, but we want to make sure that you're training your middle and lower traps first. So you have the upper traps coming like this from just below your ears, base of the skull, all the way out to the acromion here, and then cutting down in a diamond shape down to about the middle of your back, right? So that lower portion there is what we want to address, and the function of that one is almost like a tie-down strap that you have on a, when you're putting the canoe on top of your vehicle or something, right? When it contracts, it helps to pull you back like this, just like when you're ratcheting that strap down. It just, everything gets tighter, tighter, tighter like this, and pulls you back like that. So that's going to help to pull those shoulder blades back and hold you in that proper position, okay? And a good way to train that, which will also help you to perform pull-ups properly as well, is by doing the scapular row. So this is how you should initiate all of your pull-ups, is by doing this. Shrug your shoulder blades down into your back pockets, come back down. And so when I am teaching somebody how to do a pull-up, usually this is where I start them. I have them start by just hanging from a bar, right? And when you can hang from the bar for at least a minute, then I'll usually have them start doing this. And try to, work up to doing at least 20 of these. All the way up. Relax, stretch, and then come back up. And that's going to help to strengthen that shoulder girdle, help to program that muscle memory, so that when you go to do the pull-up, it just becomes second nature to initiate your pull-up that way. And so you can have hang, scapular row, do some negatives, and eventually you're doing the whole pull-up, right? So in real time, it might look like this. And ideally, maybe I'd have my hands a little bit wider out too, so I can shrug it down and bring that chest up to the bar like this. That's going to help to make sure that you're not overemphasizing the lats, which will take care of some of the problem. Okay, so the second to last exercise in part one of this series on exercises for shoulder health is the inverted row. Now the inverted row, or alternately you could use a barbell row. The advantage of the inverted row is that it takes a little bit of the back fatigue part of the equation out, which can come into play when you're doing bent over barbell row. Now you can also do chest supported row too. It's just a hits a little bit differently than doing a standard barbell row, but tends to achieve largely the same effect, which is to pull the shoulder blades back this way in the transverse plane, right? So you have that sagittal plane that connects body left to right. You have the transverse plane, which is all the motion that happens in a rotational movement here. And then you have the frontal plane, which is anything like when you're doing lateral raises and things of that nature that are out in this plane here. So this one, in that transverse plane, helping to pull. So we were doing the lower traps to pull you back this way, right, in that sagittal plane. And now we're doing the exercise in the rhomboids with the inverted row to help pull you back in the transverse plane. So we're coming back this way and we're coming back this way. Now, for the purposes of this, when you're doing rowing, usually you're going with about a shoulder width apart grip, and that's going to emphasize your lat muscles, right? Now, if you want to target primarily your rhomboids and also your rear deltoids, which if your goal is to improve your posture, that's what you want to do, then I usually use about the same grip that I use for my bench press, which for me, since I have wider arms, is a little bit wider out, right? I usually have my hands, maybe my middle fingers on the ring, on the knurling here, and a little bit wider there. That way, when I'm coming up, I can have my arms roughly at maybe 45 degrees, my upper arms 45 degrees from the torso. It's not close to the side. It's going to emphasize and hit more of the back of my shoulder here, and also emphasize the rhomboids as well. All right, last but not least, in part one of this series is the reverse fly, an oldie but goodie. This right here is a multi-joint movement, working multiple joints, right? Moving through the shoulder joint, moving through the elbow joint. So you're going to be working multiple different muscles all at the same time. This one here is more of an isolation movement for the upper back, a reverse fly. And the reason that I like to add it in is that while the rowing is good, it doesn't quite get you out in this plane of motion. And so sometimes if I'm only doing the compound movements and the multi-joint movements and the bigger muscles like that, sometimes I will feel a little bit brittle in my shoulders, right? If I start trying to do anything out in this plane of motion. And that's why I think that even though most of your muscle gains are going to come from compound movements where you can move the most amount of muscle, this doesn't mean that you want to neglect your isolation movements, but it does mean that usually you want to do the isolation movements after compound movements and after multi-joint movements. So, reverse fly, just a brief refresher overview for doing the reverse fly. Now, in the beginning, you might want to stay just completely rigid, but with me, I like to come down a little bit, get a little stretch in my hamstrings as I'm coming down, and so I can get a nice deep breath in, and then come up, hold it for a second. So I'm moving in a more natural manner, because you don't want to be like just flinging that weight up and stuff and using a ton of momentum so that you completely lose connection with the muscle when you're doing it. But as long as you're maintaining and you can feel engagement with that muscle throughout the whole thing, getting a slight bit of rock in the movement is actually going to be beneficial for helping you to engage that muscle better. So again, breathing in at the bottom. And then sometimes what I'll do after that one, dovetailed into that, is another exercise that I'm going to show you in the following video in this series. But before I move on from this exercise and wrap up this video, one other thing I want to say, you might have noticed that on the way down, I'm going a little bit slower, and on the way up, exploding up to the top. Going down, you want to go at a speed that allows you to fully fill up your lungs by about the time you get to the bottom. So as you're coming down, because it's going to take you a little bit longer to breathe in than it's going to take you to expel that air. So you want to make sure that you're moving in a cadence that it's going to allow for complete expansion and then exhalation on each and every rep. Alright guys, if you enjoyed the video, go ahead and hit that like button. If you'd like to see more content, as I said before, related to workout design for building muscle, improving athletic performance, dropping body fat, or helping you work around injuries should you sustain them, and helping to prevent injuries should you happen to get those injuries in the first place, then consider subscribing to the channel by hitting the button in the lower right hand corner of the screen. We'll see you all next time for more health and fitness information.